If I were to pick the most frustrating book I've ever read in my life, it would have to be The Trial by Franz Kafka. Now, this book came out 100 years ago, and it's the story of a bank clerk named Joseph K. And he goes to work one day, and all of a sudden, he gets arrested. He's not given his Miranda rights. He's given nothing. They don't even tell him what he's accused of, all right? In fact, the opening line of the story, it kind of makes you think of somebody we've been talking about a lot these last few weeks. Kafka writes, someone must have been telling lies about Joseph K. He knew he had done nothing wrong, but one morning, he was arrested. Kind of Job-like, right? Now, this is where it gets frustrating. Now, you expect as a reader, you're going through the book, and you're anticipating you'll find out what it is he's been charged of, but guess what? Neither Joseph K. nor you as the reader ever find out the accusations against him. The entire time, all he's trying to do is prove his innocence, and he has no idea what he's even being accused of. And you get this devastating part about halfway through the story when he realizes nobody is going to help him. Nobody is going to fight for him. Nobody's going to stand by his side, to the point that no one else stood by him. There was nothing in the world that would stand by him. I mean, here this man is. He's trying to clear his name. He's trying to get rid of his shame. He's trying to have integrity and show he's innocent. But nobody was in his corner. And there's something about that. You finally get to the end of the story, he ends up being executed. And there's no justice, and it just makes you angry. Why is that? Why, even 100 years later, does this story resonate with us? In fact, Netflix 5 years ago did a whole series on this book. It was super popular. Why is this such a deep thing? It's because the trial goes there. What do I mean? It goes into one of the deepest unspoken fears that we don't like to think about, but it's to live life alone, leaving behind a legacy of shame. When you feel like it, maybe this is you right now, maybe that's why you're here. You feel boxed in by the circumstance in your life, you feel suffocated, you feel claustrophobic by the storm that's all around you, and you just feel like you can't break free. It's hard to have hope, it's hard to have joy, and that cry so naturally explodes out of our hearts. Where are you, God? We're going to see Job answer that question. And at first, the answer he gives is not one you would expect from somebody who clearly had a love for the Lord. In fact, as Job sits in his suffering, as we've talked about, right, he's got all the physical pain. He's lost everybody that he loves practically. He has nobody to turn to. And he talks about being hemmed in by God. And not in a Psalm 139 verse 5 sort of way, when the psalmist writes, you hem me in behind and before, and you lay your hand upon me. It's this comforting thought of God wrapping his protective arms around us. That's not what Job's getting at. No, what Job is saying is, God, you've put me in this box of misery, and you will not let me out. Look what he says. Why is life given to a man whose way is hidden, whom God has hedged in? He has alienated my family from me. My acquaintances are completely estranged from me. My relatives have gone away. My closest friends have forgotten me. Here Job is, just like Joseph K. in the trial. He's trying to prove his innocence, and he has no idea why this is happening to him, and nobody is speaking on his behalf. He's got no one in his corner. And he's looking at God, and he's saying, God, why are you doing this to me? And the thing that Job was essentially saying was, he's saying, God, you're my enemy. Why are you letting this happen? And imagine just being in that place. When you think, out of all times, out of all people, God would be the one to be in the storm, but it seems like God's the one who's causing the storm for Job. And he was never more at a loss. Now, maybe that seems so distant. Now, maybe never in your life have you ever said, God, you are my enemy. But I bet if you do some introspection, you'll find that you've had thoughts similar to that. When you feel like you're going through something that has no answer, there's no clarity, there's no path to move forward, and you finally say, okay, God, what are you doing? Like, what did I do to deserve this? God, you say you love me and that you're with me, but this is a funny way of showing it. God, you say you'll have my back, but you're not there. And when you really pause to think about how little control we have, sometimes it's scary. I mean, think about it. You had no control over the parents you would have. In fact, most of your life, you've had no control over much of it, right? His guiding hands have been there. They have hemmed you in. They have put a hedge around you, but sometimes that hedge isn't so comforting. In fact, sometimes it feels like you're trapped, contained, and no way to burst out of it. And so when we ask, where are you, God, in our pain, it's not that we're saying, God, we don't know that you're here, but we're saying, God, how are you here? because it seems like the way that I need you to be here right now is not the way that your presence is being given to me. So that's the struggle that Job had. See, Job was convinced at this point that the only way out would be for God to end his life. I think we talked about this a little bit last week, right? You hear this, one of the darkest chapters of the Bible, where Job essentially says it's better just to not live than to live at all. And I think that hits home with us because many of us in this room, our lives have been affected by something like suicide. In fact, in America today, maybe you know, the suicide rate continues to go up. Depression and anxiety, that's become the norm, right? And maybe that's your struggle personally, that maybe not anybody really knows the depths of where you're at in that. And so when you read what Job says, where it's like, you know what, God, just end it, that hits home. What was Job longing for? Well, he felt alone. And that's what Satan loves to do, because what Satan does, first of all, he isolates you, which so he does with Job, makes you think that only you understand what you're going through, only you have these troubles and these trials and this storm, and then, bam, hits you with that guilt and says, wow, look, you think God's going to love you? You're not even trusting him. You see how this works. He tries to convince us that God is our enemy, and that nobody will stand on our side, nobody will advocate for us, nobody will be that person to stand in that battle and say, no, she's innocent, no, she's mine, no, he is with me, and yet we feel so alone. And the thing we fear most, as many of you know, we fear judgment. Deep down in our consciences, every single person on this planet knows that one day there will be a judgment. That after we go through death, you can look at every culture throughout history, there's an understanding there will be a judgment, and we're terrified of that, to think that I'm going to stand before God, and nobody's going to be at my side, and then what? What's going to happen next? And that's where Job was. It was a fear. And his fear centered around this idea of his legacy. And that's something I think we can relate to. We as people are very legacy obsessed. Have you noticed that? You know, I've noticed on my Google News feed, I watch football. It's one of the things I love doing. And you get to NFL quarterbacks, and there'll be these articles, what will Aaron Rodgers' legacy be? What will Tua's legacy be? You see this all the time. Like, we're constantly talking about legacy, and not just with athletes. But we're thinking about it ourselves. How will I be remembered? How will you be remembered? Will I be remembered? And what I've found is that it's not as much if we'll be remembered. I mean, to be forgotten, that stings. But our biggest fear is not just to be forgotten, it's to be remembered for our worst mistakes. For our legacy to be defined by our regrets. That's what we fear. That's what Job feared. He was so afraid that what if my legacy is just this, a man who dies in shame, that nobody will remember, that nobody will think is worthy of love. And that's why he needed an intercessor. He realized, I can't do this on my own, which is why he says, even now, my witness is in heaven. My advocate is on high. My intercessor is my friend. As my eyes pour out tears to God on behalf of a man, he pleads with God as one pleads for a friend. Now, who could be that for Job? You know, if you read about his friends, none of them could be that. They couldn't be there for him all the time, and they didn't defend him at all. Like, his wife certainly didn't do that either. So who would his witness be? Who would his intercessor be between him and God? There's only one person it could be. Because the thing is, it wasn't just an intercessor who would stand at his side and fight for him. He needed an intercessor, a friend who would right all of his wrongs, a friend who would vindicate him, a friend who would lead him through death, a friend who would give him hope that lasted, that was never taken away by a storm. And there's only one intercessor, there's only one friend in this world that can deliver that. One Redeemer who can buy you back from your worst moments and your shame and give you a legacy of joy, of identity, of meaning, and of hope. And as Job reaches that point of total loneliness, finally, that hope breaks out. Look what he says. Oh, that my words were recorded, that they were written on a scroll, that they were inscribed with an iron tool on lead or engraved in rock forever. I know that my Redeemer lives, and that in the end he will stand on the earth. And after my skin has been destroyed, yet in my flesh I will see God. I myself will see him with my own eyes, I and not another, how my heart yearns within me. How could Job have such confidence that that would be his reality? That his Redeemer would come and stand on the earth, that his legacy would be engraved in stone, not in shame and pain and guilt, but engraved in hope and joy and freedom. It's because he knew who our intercessor is. It's the one who says, I am the resurrection and the life. Whoever believes in me will live, Even though they die, and whoever lives and believes in me will never die. If you're searching for that question, where is Jesus? Where is God in my pain? Well, there he is, as he always has been. He's the only one who's always with you. He's the only one who knows how to defend you. He's the only one who knows you more than you know yourself. And he's the only one who knows your pain and can say, I know exactly how you feel, and he means it. He's the only one who could be that advocate to not only defend you, but vindicate you, to be in that hedge with you, to never, ever let you leave his side. That's him. That's Jesus. And he knows that you're conscious of your sin. He knows those things that keep you up at night. He knows the darkness that's all around you, and yet his light bursts through. And he wants you to know something every single day. If you ever ask that question, where are you, God? Not only does he say, I'm right here, but he wants you to know who you are. He says, you're a child of God. That is who you are. And how that happened was not easy, right? You know the story. That vindication, that hope that Jesus gave you wasn't pain-free. It didn't happen overnight, did it? What did Jesus do? He did the unthinkable. The God of the universe becoming a human being, putting on human skin, containing himself to that, going through, putting himself in that hedge of the most intense suffering and pain anyone's ever gone through, right? And he could have backed out of it. He could have busted out of that box. He could have been free from it. But he couldn't. Why? Because you're that important. This man, called a man of sorrows, right? The God-man, Jesus, he identified not with the kings, not with the uppity of society, not with the influencers, with millions of followers. That wasn't his thing. You know who he identified with? Tax collectors, prostitutes, sinners, the canceled, the outcast. He identifies with you too. See, Jesus, he knew the amount of pain he would go through, and yet the unthinkable for him was not having you at his side. The unthinkable for him is to think of an existence without you. And so what does he do? Well, he redeems us from our worst mistakes. He redeems us from Satan, sin, and death. He rescues us. And how did he do that? You know. I mean, can't you see yourself in that story? I mean, we talked about Martha, right? Imagine, right? I mean, a lot of you have been there. You shared this with me. Loved ones, and you're standing in front of that grave, and it's just, this isn't right, and death isn't right. And Jesus is there. Not just to be there to take up space, but there to tell you, this isn't over. Not by a long shot. Those Job moments when you feel like him, oh, nobody gets what I'm going through. God, where are you in my storm? Where he's always been. When you ask that question, where's Jesus in your pain? He's right there. You go back to that cross and you see written on his face every tear you've cried, every little bit of pain you've endured. It's all there. You see how much Jesus loves you. You see his love for you. His hands are outstretched. But of course, Jesus didn't stay on that cross, right? Our cross is empty for a reason. What does he do? He takes you by the hand to an empty tomb, a tomb cut out of rock. If you're looking for a legacy that lasts, there it is. And then he opens up this book the Bible calls life, and you see your name engraved in the permanent blood that he shed for you. That's who you are. That's your story. That's your legacy. Then he goes one step further. He shows you those hands that he chose to keep the nail marks there, right? Every time Jesus looks at his hands to this day, he says, that's your name written there. You belong to me. Then in life and in death, there's nothing that can separate us from God's love. And that's why it's so incredible we get to do with the word, with sacraments, to know that God comes near to us. That he will always speak for you on your behalf. He will be your advocate from now up until eternity, right? Forever. You have a dear friend in Jesus that will never let you down. A dear friend that nothing, again, can separate us from him. And so when you think about this life God has given you of never being alone, right? It changes how you look at everything. You know, so often, if you're like me, we search for God's presence in all the wrong places. You know, we look for God in kind of those big, huge, ecstatic, excitable moments where our emotions are high and everything seems to come together the way we want it to, but that's not personal enough for God. You know, God comes to us through something like a Bible, through water and word like baptism, through bread and wine like communion. We think to ourselves, okay, that's so simplistic. Like, why would God humble himself to be given in that way? Can't he just blow us away with his power? We never doubt him. We know if he could just get rid of all the storms in my life, then everything would be so much better. But God wants to truly love you. And it's true. The only way we could really know God's love is if suffering is a part of our story. Without suffering, we would never know the extent of God's love for us. And so to me, it's kind of neat that he comes to us in a book, and water and bread and wine, these simple, common things, because he's approachable. He'll never stop running after you. And that's what makes the Christian hope so unique. We stop asking why God, and we start asking him, Lord, lead me closer to you through this. And just like I talked about the kids, and the kids said beautifully, you talk about death, which is something we, in our culture, don't like to talk about. We don't like to go there. And yet we know it's coming. Because death, what makes us so terrified of it? Isn't it the fact that we go into it alone? You can't take anybody else with you. You can't take anything with you. But don't be mistaken, you're not alone in that. A dear pastor, mentor of mine named Mark Pauschem puts it this way. In that moment when all others must stand back and death approaches with its cold reality, only one will remain. The one who passed through death before us, the one who went through the grave and came out alive, Jesus. His presence is the guarantee that even in death, we are never alone. Never alone. Isn't that amazing? To think that God cares that much, that even though we should go through death alone, he doesn't ever leave us alone. He takes us by the hand. He tells us it's okay. I'm just taking you home now. Because yes, we do. We are so afraid. What if God won't remember me? Just like the thief on the cross, right? Jesus, remember me when you come to your kingdom. You know what our God says to you? He says, can a mother forget the baby at her breast and have no compassion on the child she has born? Though she may forget, I will not forget you. All of a sudden, in this world, in our culture, it's so afraid of being judged by people, being canceled by people, wondering if they'll find me valuable and worthy of love. If God will never forget you and he'll always remember you, who cares what other people say? And honestly, this might sound heartless, but who cares what your own heart tells you about yourself? What matters is, how does Jesus see you? And you know how he sees you. He sees you as dearly loved, as royalty, as a kingdom of priests to serve and honor him throughout your entire life, that life packed with significance and meaning that nobody can take from you. That's hope. That's what Jesus gives you. And you know what that does in your life? All of a sudden, all those people that are the outcast, and you know them in your job, you know them at home, you know them in your family, those people that are maybe a little bit off to the side, that nobody talks to, that are defenseless, that are broken, that are reeling, you go to them. And you identify with them. Even if people look at you like, why would you talk with so-and-so? Why spend time? Because if Jesus could spend time with me, and if he's given me people that I can come alongside and to give his presence to, is there anything greater than that? I don't think there is. And we talk all the time about real hope and joy and how elusive those things are, and yet we have that. We have that gift of Jesus. And the more you think much of God, the more that he just envelops everything that you do, you start to see what this life is really all about. Not only will you be remembered, you're going to leave behind a legacy that truly will change the world, even if nobody else recognizes that. By being a child of God and walking through your daily life, joining Jesus on his mission of redemption to redeem all the things that Satan thinks he has, to give it back, to redeem it back to Jesus, that is an eternal difference-making life because you have that gift of Jesus. And it's a gift that goes across every barrier, every culture around the globe. And I got to experience that last week in Grenada. That's a picture of little Isabella. She got baptized into God's family last Sunday. And there we are, jam-packed in this 85, probably 90-degree room by the time everybody was in there. And I've never, in a long time at least, I've never experienced such joy in that place, especially considering what Grenada is like. So maybe you remember a few months ago when Hurricane Beryl came through? Half the island of Grenada is still completely devastated. We have teams on the ground now trying to help rebuild some of the homes of the church members there. It's an amazing mission congregation. I stood in front of them, just like I'm standing in front of you, to preach on Job. And just like I feel with you, a lot of times I don't feel qualified to talk about suffering because many of you have gone through much more than I could even begin to imagine. And that's how I felt with them. And here I am talking to people who have lost their homes. They have friends who died in a hurricane. And it's all the more real. And Aline just comes through, and you just look at that, and you think, oh my goodness, where is Jesus? And so I said that to him. I said, I just feel so underqualified to talk to you about suffering. Well, after church, this older member of the congregation, she comes up to me, and she says, Pastor, your suffering and mine are the same. Now, this woman, mind you, lost her home in the hurricane. She's lost I think she's lost 2 kids to this point. And she says to me, our suffering is the same. I said, what do you mean? Like, there's no way. And she said, well, yeah, Because the answer to our suffering is the same. It's Jesus. She's wise. I learned something. But it's true. Where is Jesus in your pain? Where he's always been. He's at your side. And what does Jesus tell you through his word? He says what? Never will I leave you. Never will I forsake you. Yes, I hem you in, but don't be mistaken. I'm in that storm with you. I've hemmed myself in alongside you. You will never be forgotten. I will go before you. I'm with you. Don't be discouraged. Don't be afraid. Because on Christ, the solid rock we stand, all other ground is sinking sand. We love our Savior. We know his love will never fail us. And all God's people said, amen.